reverberating through her head this morning. Opening night was a great success in many ways, but probably not a great thing for her head this morning. So see how she goes over the next hour. Actually, Michael, just turn this up even more. Okay. So for those of you who don't know Bronwyn has been working in the arts for a great many years. Seriously, when you look around this region of Scenic Rim, you'll just see her fingerprints all over the place in terms of the amount that she's helped people to grow their artistic practice and to realise their creative dreams. So I feel really honoured today to be sharing the stage with her and interviewing her as she kind of achieves some of her creative dreams, because she's quite often been the person who's been the giver, and it's great to see her as a recipient and putting herself out into the spotlight today. So it's a pleasure. Now, sometimes when you interview people, it's a matter of getting them to open up, and sometimes it's a matter of getting them to shut up. Which one are you, Bronwyn?
No, I don't know. After last night,
Okay. Look, I've decided to implement. Ron's told me, would you be happy to interview? I was thinking, yes, definitely be happy to interview this morning. And we're going to be talking about things in terms of their artistic background and the art. We're going to be talking about this exhibition. We're also going to be talking, that's timely, perfect, about trees. We're rattling around the roof right now. Now, what I've decided to do is to format these questions. We're going to do Hello Fairy. Hey Simon. We're going to do Bronwyn fast and slow. Is that all right? Yeah, a bit early for that. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to ask Bronwyn some questions really quick about her art. So here we go.
all right.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
This is going to be super quick.
Okay.
We're talking about, can someone actually get their stopwatch out? And we're going to go 20 questions. Louise is on the stopwatch. We're going to go 20 questions in less than 2 minutes. You're going to find out more about her in this 2 minutes than you ever knew about her before.
Oh my gosh.
In terms of her art. I won't go too personal. Okay, here we go. The questions that count. Louise, start the clock.
Go.
Favourite colour?
Turquoise.
Favourite artist?
Favourite artist.
Ooh, yeah. Favourite gallery?
Goma.
Ooh, favourite object in your studio?
Easel.
Nice. If I could own one piece of art, what would it be?
One of Rosalie Gascoigne's installations.
Nice, look that up later on, people put it in Google. Okay, if I could invite one artist to dinner, who would it be?
Brett Whiteley.
Ooh, nice. If I had to cut one colour out of the rainbow, what would it be?
Oh.
She's not giving up on this lightly.
Violet.
Ooh, yeah, me too. Music or no music while you paint?
Music.
Ideal amount of time for a painting session?
18 hours.
Favourite medium?
Drawing.
If I couldn't paint, I would
Die.
Best piece of advice you've ever had as an artist?
Don't give up.
Favourite quote about art or creativity?
Life is brief, but my God, some Thursdays are incredibly long. Brett Whiteley.
Nice. An artist who changed your life?
Brett Whiteley.
What's the best piece of art you've ever bought?
Monkey Horror.
Nice. What's the best exhibition you've ever been to?
So many. Probably one of the APTs.
Okay, great. What's a piece of art that you would dearly like to experience in person? I'm going to give it some time.
One of Christo's works.
Okay. Ever paint while under the influence?
Yes.
Was it any good? What's the strangest surface you've ever painted on?
Lace. Postcards.
I liked the lace. Ever painted Well, that was us doing it fast. How was that?
That's good, that was fun.
That was fun. Let's give Bronwyn some love. We give love in a certain way. So I'll just show you. Go 1, 2, 3, Bronwyn. Ready? Bronwyn Davies. 3, 2, 1. Oh, Krispy Kreme on a Saturday morning. Well done. Okay, so we're going to slow down now. We're going to go broadly on your artistic kind of background. What's your first memory of painting?
Of my painting?
Of you as an artist, as a child? What's your first memory of doing that?
When I was at, we had blackboards, and I can remember trying to draw a tree, and I did it in beautiful drawing a neck, and that was like a chunk of a tree. But probably my first experience of art was actually going to the Sydney side, I was here, to the Art Centre in the Rocks, and there was a Brett Whiteley exhibition on. So I'm 60, so I was 9, so it was a long time ago. And there was a fantastic painting of the Alders, and it had possum's tails sticking out of it, little text, and I just thought, this is amazing. And I've just loved his work ever since then, and he's really, I think he's quite perfect. His use of mixed media, I really love. Yeah.
And so, as a child, was art something that you did all the time?
Yeah, I was always drawing, but I was also always organising plays and musical recitals for guests, and acting like we were air hostesses, and so all the people that would come to my father's business lunch things would have to be the passengers on my plane, or they'd have to be at my concert, or they'd be part of my theatre, and we had big barrels full of dress-up clothes that we used to. So it was a lot of that, and we had a grand piano, and my brother used to, instead of playing piano, he used to make all sorts of weird installation type noises, like bouncing ping pong balls on strings at the back.
Yeah.
And so we sort of, I guess we were sort of kind of loose and creative. Yeah.
Yeah, creepy. And early on, were there any mentors that kind of struck you as people that you really learned from early on in the piece?
Not really. I have to say, at school, I was very passionate about art, but I wasn't academic and technically astute in the arts. And I had this art teacher who told me what I wanted to do for my year 12. I was in year 11, and they said, oh, I like your other idea, I don't think you should do that, and so I quit school.
Yeah.
So I don't really think that I had a mentor.
No.
I thought, how do you? So that put me off, actually, because I didn't fit into the mold.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, so when was it that you actually decided for certain that was the area that you were going to pursue?
Look, I don't know, these things kind of evolve. I got a job when I was about 17, working in a design company. It was called Hooveniers, and they made logos and did branding. It was the first branding company in Australia, and they did things like Westpac Bank logo and Australia Post and stuff like that. So I was an assembly artist, and what we would do in the studio, which overlooked Brett Whiteley's place in Latin Debate, and the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and I'm a hippie, and I'd rather be out on the boats or going to the beach with my friends. Instead I'm in the studio, but I'm having to, in those days you didn't have the computers to create text for all these manuals that we created, people's logos and all this. So you letter set everything, and then I would, to the right size points and things like this, and then you'd go into this bromide machine and create. So that was my job. This is the arts. and they did Tubes beer, I think it was one of the beer, or do you remember KB beer? Yeah? And so it was an oval, and that was supposed to subliminally make you think of the empty glass so you would drink more. And I just thought, this is really, didn't sit well with me. So anyway, so I quit that and was working as a naturopath, or working to be a naturopath in a health food shop and studying naturopathy. And I didn't really get into doing my own artwork until I moved to the mountain, actually. Yeah, I did a little bit when I was living in a commune in northern New South Wales. But other than that, it sort of evolved over time here, really. Did that answer that question?
Yeah, I reckon. It's an interesting little track. Yeah. Why is it important to you to paint? Because we know, like I suppose I'm going to ask you about the benefits, obviously, of art per se, but what benefits, or why do you personally paint? What is it in you that is drawn to that?
There's something, it probably starts with drawing, because I think that I think differently. I perceive that I think differently from others, and it helps me to express what I'm thinking. It helps me to slow down. It helps me to have a language for all those things that are going through my brain. And the feeling, the actual sensuous feeling of putting charcoal on the canvas or paper, it's like eating, you know, it's like breathing. So there's something about that that always makes me feel welcome at home, and I love exploring. There's that time in a painting where I don't want to be interrupted, I'm still trying to work out this thing in my head, and you know, that's when I'll say to my guy, don't talk to me. And then after a while, when I'm in full flow, a bomb could go off, or anyone could be sitting there talking to me, whatever, and I'm fine. But there's this moment in that process where I'm just trying to, I guess it's a bit like being a conduit. There's a lot of artists in the room, and I think you probably understand what that's like. It's like when you get into the flow. Yeah, so I think it is. It's about just needing to get into the zone.
18 hours you mentioned earlier is an ideal session. So.
Well, yeah. Well, that's. I think I probably just about did that with these two.
Yeah. So you're just fully immersed in these for 18 hours, pretty much.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Wow, it's amazing. It's amazing. Why is art relevant to you? Like, because you've been working in the arts, not just as an artist, but obviously as someone who's helped a lot of other artists. What's its relevance?
It's massively important. Words can only convey so much. You know, if you read something in a newspaper about some piece that's going on, you take it in one level. But to experience it and to understand it in a 360-degree way, you need messages coming in different ways, and not everybody is stimulated by that written word in that sort of reporting type style. So it might be that people get the message through dance, or they get the message through music, or they get the message through poetry, or it hits on that viscera. And I have a story about that. Probably everyone's heard that story.
Let's hear it again.
Okay, I'm going to tell you. So, Kate Grenfell, the writer, when I was doing my masters, I was doing some stuff around listening to her, and she had been invited to speak on the Festival of Big Ideas at the Sydney Opera House, and she'd been asked to talk about climate change. So that was 2010. So we're still talking about it. Anyway, and she thought, I'm a writer. What can I say about climate change that hasn't already been said by professors and philosophers and everybody else? Anyway, she was thinking about this, and she was in Canberra, and she was going through this park, and I think it's Yarralumla Park, and she saw this artwork, and she saw the plaque that described the artwork, and it was called, this is a tribute to the Civex. And the Civex was a boat that was carrying 350 refugees that sank, and all those people died. And she read this, and she thought, that's sad, saw the written words. And then she actually walked down through the park and saw the artwork, and what it was, I can't remember, I have visited it to check it out. It's about 200 poles, and these poles are shaped in the shape of this boat, and they've been dedicated by churches and schools from across Australia to the people who died on that boat. Anyway, she saw the shape of she saw that these poles were set up in sort of a loop that was the size of the boat, and it was not very big, it was probably less than the length of this room, and on that little boat there had been 350 people crammed. And suddenly she saw, or she felt, that that was the power of that public artwork, and the fact that each pole had been dedicated by groups of people at schools where they'd been thinking about those people. So she talked about this, and she said that she realised then that art has this power to engage and hit you in your viscera at a different level. And so then she understood that as a writer, she could actually be writing about climate change in her books, or embedding those messages in her works. And so I think, personally, I think we have a duty, because I don't think our politicians... I don't think the politicians...
You all are.
That's true. I think we have a duty to actually use whatever tools we have. That's my personal philosophy on the environment, and so for me I think that's the biggest issue at the moment, and so I'm using my art to send a message that way. Does that make sense? Did I answer?
Yeah, 100%. It's awesome. And I actually haven't heard you share that story.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Okay, hands up who has heard me tell that story before. Oh, good.
Maybe Ben was the only person actually listening. Next time I interview Bronwyn and she says, has anyone ever heard this story? You better all put your hands up. I know you, I know. We recognise your face and know that you're here. And you were just nodding. I hope you don't. I'm wondering for you, we'll get on to some trees and environmental issues later on. But when you get the idea for an exhibition like this one or like your previous exhibitions, where does the idea arrive from? Are you conscious of that, or is it more of an unconscious thing where you suddenly go, I think I'd like to do that, or you're in the middle of it and then you realise this could be an exhibition? How does the idea of an exhibition, it's a big body of work, how does it kind of arrive on? Is it gradual? Is it sudden? Does it come from the heavens above, or is it something you consider?
I think all of those things. My favourite sort of travel these days now is actually seeing the natural environment. It's great to have the grooms in the room here as well, because the national parks is just, to me, is just this incredible thing, better than any cathedral that you can see in Europe. But anyway, just experiencing nature and seeing the next exhibition I'd like to do would be around the coral reefs and the coral bleaching, but also about mangroves, because mangroves are the lungs of the planet. So I have that process from my studies, I guess, about thinking about the arts from planning out things in a visual diary and thinking about that. But usually it's when I'm in the landscape and I don't know, it's like walking past those trees above Dave's head over there, I would just pass over and the light was amazing. I just thought, that's just beautiful. I think it's trying to get what my vision is, or what my thoughts are about, matched to the awe of something.
Yeah, right. And in terms of when a piece of art begins, like how does that happen? So you're in exhibition mode and you're going, I'm going to do in consideration of trees as an example, and then you're starting new works, because each of these would have had to start at some point. How does that process come into you?
Well, I guess if I talk about the most recent works, which are these ones, there's something immediate about those because they're on charcoal and I'm actually using my fingers and hands and things to actually embed them into the paper. The ones that Susan's looking at in the far end of the mandala ones, and I think the process, you asked me the process, yeah?
Yeah, how does the piece of work arrive?
Yeah, well I guess for those ones, I think about New Age-ism and our, we place a lot of merit and we sell a lot of stuff around, Asian philosophies and things like that, and I've had a lot of exposure. And I've also been to Tibet and seen the coloured chakras and the mandalas, what to do with that philosophy, and it's fascinating, focusing the mind. So I also experienced that same feeling from being in nature. So I think nature is its own mandala, that focus, you can. So then I thought, well, okay, what are these trees? I can see the result, their fruit, the quandong fruit, or the occasional blossom and things, but you don't often see them because they're way up in the canopy. So anyways, I do a fair bit of research, and I'd always pick up different things and take them home and find out what leaf it was. But I certainly couldn't recognise them for those people who have been on a walk this morning. I'm no expert about saying, well, that's a such and such. But anyway, it was a process of learning. So I think it's a mixture of being inspired, then going, okay, so how am I going to do that? I'm going to do a series of mandala works, or I'm going to do a series of, and these ones were kind of, sometimes I go into the forest and for instance, the vines, I just think they're so incredible. And the way they wrap around and they pull down trees, or they create bridges, all sorts of things. But often there's an emotional response to the work, to the subject. So this one, there's a poem here called Fallen, and I'm thinking, these trees, these leaves were once resplendent at the top, and then gradually they they fall to the ground and they rot. But that's a bit like life, isn't it? But they nurture something great and they create great. And I think that's what all of our lives do. So I mean, there's that kind of connection, just a roundabout way of
Yeah, it sounds like there was a conceptual thing that happened at the beginning with the mandalas in terms of, like concept of that piece thing and then the concept of the piece of the rainforest and stuff.
Yeah, I had cut out some circles.
Yep.
So I just drew some circles and I had some paints and I went out on the deck and I painted the background. So I had all these different coloured backgrounds. I'm going, okay, so that suits that tree and I'm going to go and research that and that's its flower. That's
interesting question around levels of resolution and where you begin and end a piece when you know it's finished versus when you kind of go, no, I want to work that harder. And it must be such a subjective thing, but what is it for you?
Well, that's why this space was particularly good because when you've got a long space, you can stand back and you get a different impact than you do when you're working close on the easel. So sometimes that space, you can be working up close on something, and I do quite a lot of fine work. It's not until you stand back and you can sort of see, that's enough. It might be that my husband comes in and tells me I need to draw some ants or put a bird in a picture or something like that, or you can't have that line like that. I quite like the unfinished. The studies on the other side I quite like seeing those brushstrokes because it reminds me again of Brett Whiteley's work. It's that sort of, you can see where I was. Whereas I think Michael would often say, hang on, people don't want to see that, you should drop that out. I think it should stay. So we often have little twists about that. Jousts.
Yeah, I was wondering about whether it was a tryst or a joust. Come on, Bronwyn, work the resolution before. I'm sure it was a joust. I personally love that, being able to see, that process in a work. I know there were some people who commented on that last night to me at the opening. So amazing. In terms of these paintings, a lot of them have stories behind them, even though they're a visual medium. And I think you are a storyteller, you're someone who likes to share stories around your work as well. What's your favourite, not your favourite painting, but your favourite story behind a painting in this exhibition?
Oh, look, I think Walking with Judith Wright, which is the one behind Barbara over there on the wall. That's a painting that I did in 2010, so it's older. But I was working with Margie, who's over there, and we were doing some research and projects, artworks around Judith Wright. And that's when I started that. And all those leaves are leaves that you will find in the forests here. And that, what looks like a sort of snake going through the painting is actually my version of a map through the Knoll National Park. And you'll see that the first tree is a ring tree, which I didn't even realise was a ring tree. And there's text. Underneath that, there's a couple of Judith Wright's poems. And there's a map of Queensland. And so this is sort of layering, I lay out my thinking around it. So, Walking with Judith Wright, she would trace her, when she was blind and deaf, she could trace on a page the walk around a knoll. And so that's why I'm sort of thinking she used to walk there every day. But there's a tree there that was, my kids called the rhinoceros tree. Now it's almost rotted away. And but I've seen lyrebirds with their tails in full, the other lyrebirds with its tail full up. Or there'd be a spot where there'd be lots of wallabies and things like that. So I put those on there. So it's kind of like a visual map of a space. And that's pretty special.
It seems like the knoll has actually been a special place for you. We'll talk about some of the tree stuff a bit more in the second half of our time together. But the knoll seems to have inspired a lot of your work, like walks in that space. Is that
I've lived twice in the Knoll Road. I've worked here at the Bondi Youngman, I've had clubs only up the road, so it was sort of my go-to walk. I've had few people who have died in my life who walked through that forest and brought me a lot of solace and calm. I've taken the Tibetan monks there, and when they dissolved the colour chakra that they made the mandala at the library, we scattered the the sand over the edge. I've been to weddings and I've been to, memorials and all sorts of things there. And as I say, I lived on it when the kids were really little, and they're now in their 30s. They used to play in the national park, and I would walk every day, and I'd say, before they went to school, I'd go for a walk through the national park. It's a grounding thing, Yeah, so I'm most familiar with that one. But now I'm doing a lot of walking in Palmer Road because I've moved. So I'm closer to Palmer Road.
Nice. When you put this exhibition together, do you ever have your end audience in mind, or do you tend to just follow the white rabbit? Like, do you have an intent, like where you go, I'd really like people to take this away from this exhibition, or is it more they'll take away what they want and I'll do what I kind of feel moved to do?
No, I think I've got I want to see my tribe. I want to see the people who are drawn to trees and to nature. I'd like to encourage people who are not to come and see it and see whatever they get out of it. That is their business. I think for me as an artist, to put a piece of work up, whatever it is, and I think whether that's a poetry or there are poets in the audience or writing or whatever, if people have that aha moment, then I've achieved. I don't know what that aha means, because it's funny when you hear people describe your artwork and they say, oh, this reminds me of this, or that was about that, and that might have had nothing in my mind, nothing like that, but that's okay, it's for them.
Yeah.
So I guess, I think it's just great to see us celebrating nature. And other people who are interested in doing that.
Absolutely. So what does when you're holding an exhibition like this, what does success look like for the artist? What does that look like?
I feel very successful after last night. I feel successful before everyone came and it was actually hung, and it was like, wow, I feel successful that we were able to work out all of this. I feel successful that we were, there's months and months and months of work in the back end, getting systems together about sales. It was great that I had a team of people to help me. It's great that I had access to this brilliant space. Because although I love Under the Greenwood Tree as a gallery, it just couldn't have had this many artworks in it.
Yeah.
So it's success. It's quite. I had an exhibition last year in my home, but that was right in the middle of COVID, so we could only have a small amount of people there. So it's nice to see work and so much of it in a big space. That's pretty successful. Yes, and it's nice to see some red dots. That's good.
They're always good.
It's nice to see it, that it's in people's homes, and then I might have to go and visit and you can see it. I love it. And if you have bought any works, send me a photograph of it hanging in your home. Because I know Jess is over there, and I've got photographs of hers, and I've got, I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
That's success, I think.
Yeah. I was just genuinely interested, because I suppose, like, when people come in and they're talking to you about the work as well, what are the things that they say or have said about this work last night that most kind of deeply moved you, or you went, oh, that's nice?
Well, I think people really like it, which is nice. People have liked the words too, which is nice. That's really good. It's funny, people are saying to me, how did you do all this and work full time as well? And I'd have to say, how could I not? Because it's kind of like the foil to that. There are lots of people here who have to do other day jobs as well as their art. And sometimes working in government is not the most fun thing to do. So it's a nice way to unwind and unpack. So did I answer that?
Yeah, you definitely did. In terms of, you mentioned the words and the poems, what comes first? Is it always for you a piece of art and then you sit with that and you're inspired by the actual art of the poem, or are the poem and the visual representation coming from the same place?
Well, generally the poems are quite separate to the artworks, and they will be about my engagement with whatever the environment is in the day. Sometimes I'll be going to meetings all day at work, but I'll take half an hour walk through the rainforest and I'll sit and try to still my mind before the day gets crazy. And so to write would help in that space. So I write a poem about, I don't know, wherever I happen to find whatever I was seeing. Michael made a seed, shouldn't tell the counsellor, down a bush track.
It's a cone of silence. Turn off the camera for this part.
Anyway, it looks out over, it looks towards where Sue and Mark live over on the Eagle Heights, but it looks out to the coast and up north to Brisbane. And so quite often I'll ride the bike down the electric bike down there and then sit. And, you know, nature's amazing. You know, you can sit in the same place and there can be 50 different types of cloud or, you know, the smells or the birds or the colour of the bark or whatever. And it's, you know, Michael would tell you that I'm not always present. You know, 50 million different things going on at once. I'm sure a lot of us are like that. But it is a place for me to become present. I can't remember your question now, but anyway.
It's about words and...
Oh yeah, okay, so that's right. So I would sit there and I would, whatever was moving, you know, it might be cloudy, so I'd write a poem about the mist or something. So then with this exhibition I go, okay, which of those poems works with these? Or, and I think that was inspired because I wrote a lot of poetry for the last exhibition, little haiku type things. And I think that helped people to connect with what I was trying to say in art.
Yeah, definitely. There were a lot of people commenting on the works last night, and not just the pieces of works. It's interesting to hear that sometimes they're not, because some of them are so perfectly matched, and some of them have this, like, dissonance where they're still relevant, but you know, not. It's not like, okay, I'm describing the buttress roots today. Yeah. We might move on to trees, and that means it's time to do Bronwyn Fast again. Are we ready, people? Okay, good. Let's go. Where's here? Because you know if I don't put that timer on, you know what Bronwyn's going to do today. She's going to go down that rabbit hole. Okay, ready? Here we go. Trees. Ever climb a tree?
Yes.
Ever fall out of a tree?
No.
Safety. Favourite kind of tree?
Eucalypts.
Nice. Ever been in a tree house?
Yes.
Favourite rainforest walk on the mountain?
The knot.
Okay. Favourite wood? Sorry, trees.
Eucalypt.
Best thing about trees?
They're witnessing.
Ever get stung by a stinging tree?
Yes.
Did you know the antidote can be found at the bottom of the tree?
Like country boy.
Country boy, well done. What's the best thing about a tree?
Its presence.
Nice. Ever named a tree?
Yes.
Ever spoken to a tree?
Yes.
Ever had a tree talk back?
No.
Okay. That's good. Ever hugged a tree?
Yes.
Major benefit of spending time with trees?
Slowing down, becoming calm.
Ever saved a tree?
Yes.
If you were a tree, what kind of tree would Bronwyn Davies be?
I'd like to think I could be a big, tall, floated gum. Or wait, maybe this one. This was near the track where I just talked about because when it sheds its bark, it's this beautiful orange. I'd like to be like that, I think.
That's a nice orange. Strangest thing you've ever seen in a tree?
I think sometimes
You're so close, you're so close.
toys. Not sex toys.
Just to clarify, strangest thing you've ever done in a tree? Speaking of sex toys.
I can't answer that one.
Ever been naked in a tree?
I can't.
I told you we were going to get close to the answer today. Okay.
I just said just to make you blush.
It worked. Okay, so that's our doing trees fast. Let's slow down. What's the significance of the name of the exhibition in consideration of trees?
Okay, so I remember at work, and I've been working for 16 years for Senior Council, on leave at the moment. There was a presentation by the guy that looks after parks about trees. And there's a value, part of his presentation is showing the value, and it, you know, whatever height, you know, there's the amount of work to maintain that tree and to the shape that it provides and its ambience for the street, etc. So that's, you know, the consideration of trees is a measure in one sense, but it doesn't measure the whole ecology. It measures it from an ambience or streetscaping type of perspective. And I think that we've got to start thinking about that for the whole of nature, because we don't put a monetary value on lots of intangible things, and I think because of that, it gets disregarded. Art gets disregarded, because mental health gets disregarded, until it has an impact on lost productivity. Things are disregarded. So I think we need to start valuing all those, you know, clear skies. What is the value of having clear skies instead of polluted skies? All those things. So the value of a tree to me needs the consideration of the trees, all the things. And I think that I have to apologise that there are no creatures. I just ran out of time. I wanted to do a whole lot of insects and all the little creatures and bugs and birds, and there'll be other exhibitions. I just ran out of time to do them. But the life within the trees, I mean, they're cities, there's universes, there's thousands and thousands of sentient beings that are in these landscapes, and these paintings at the back are all of bushfire affected areas in national parks, thousands and thousands of hectares that I think are affected by the climate crisis that we're in. So I think we need to consider what the loss of that environment is. You know, the value of the trees needs to be considered.
And how much of an environmental driver was present when you creating the work?
Oh, absolute. There's I can't think of the author's name. There's a beautiful book called Phosphorescence. Yeah, that's a really beautiful, you know, this notion of awe. And, you know, we become so inured. We get everything fed to us by Netflix, you know, huge things come into our lives and we go, oh yeah, that's another piece of news, and it passes. I think we need to slow down and value the beauty. I see a lot of the environmental movement, my own criticism is that it's a lot about all the bad things that are happening, and that's true. I'm not taking away they are bad. But is that working? I think because we see horror stories every day on the news, is that the right message? And I call all the artists to think about visioning, because the politicians can't vision. They're not visionary. You can see that. We don't have, you know what it's like if you, sometimes if you give people too many choices, they can't make a decision, and so they switch off. So I believe that we need to vision a better future. We need to inspire people. We need to make people love something so that they'll protect it. So hopefully that's what these works do. And you know, I challenge people to think of a vision. What does a better world look like? Because I don't think we've got that. I mean, nobody's showing us what that's going to look like. And you know, I'd encourage artists. I'd like to do a series of where nature takes over the cities, and it's, you know, vines climbing over everything, and you know, the infrastructure is all returned more like Avatar, you know, become a forest creature again. Do you think it's Mother? No, it's Mother? Amaya, what do you think? You're the youngest person in the room. What do you reckon?
You like that whole nature? Invading those cities?
Love it. Did I see you dance last night?
No, that was another.
That was pretty sensational, I've got to say.
Yeah.
Need more children at exhibitions. So in terms of the whole exhibition being dedicated to trees, I think you've already spoken to that question. But is it something, do you feel like this, because I know that the previous exhibition that was held at your house, there was a lot of, it was lungs and hearts, and a lot of the patterns that were in those pieces of work were of nature. also had something to say about the relation to nature and breath and heart. And this work's got breath and heart and a connection to nature as well, even though it's not as literal as that. Do you feel like this is kind of a stage of your artistic work, or do you feel like this is actually your artistic work is the connection between like using your mediums, drawing, painting, etc., to explore the environment? Is that something that's kind of is your purpose?
Yeah, it is. And I think I've pondered a lot about the period of Australian art, where the Heidi generation, not the Heidi school, but the Heidi group, where the Sydney Nolan people like that, were exploring, what was it to be Australian in the 1930s and 40s, 50s. And, they broke the mould and they looked at, our heroes and Ned Kelly series, all of that stuff. But I've been thinking lately about what is it to be an Australian, and what the Australians that I've met on that short road trip, the people out in the farms in the middle of New South Wales, and then the people in Sydney Harbour at the Sydney to Hobart yacht race, we all think of ourselves as Australian, but what is that? Very different values, very different experiences. So I'm starting to think, what is there ism in art, apart from Indigenous art, which is fabulous and it will always be fabulous, but what are we saying about Australia and what is the ism that I would fall under contemporary landscape artists? But I'd like to think of myself as being part of hopefully is it UFA? Is that how you say that? Which is about the environment, which is about saying something about nature, rather than put me in a box of monism or whatever. That's what I want to do, and I know that there are some artists and poets and writers in the room who are in that space, and I'd like us to be identified that way. Did I answer any questions? I don't know.
She is answering questions.
In my roundabout way.
The wormholes are the most interesting part of any chat, I reckon. What decision? So obviously, does this then become part of your this artistic expression? Does that then become part of your guardianship of the environment? Like you see people who are changing the ways they garden or farm or look after land or care for land. Is this part of your guardianship of the land to bring people to it so that they see it more deeply?
Yeah, I think so. And it's not just the exhibition, it's all of the conversations you'll have with each other. It's about the people that we've got a program, having worked in events for a long, long time. To me, that's been my art practice as well over the last however many years. And so I think having a short, sharp exhibition where we can focus people's attention, but also that there are all these amazing people who are going to be speaking their truth about the environment. And if we can change one person's actions, or if we can make something happen from our interactions, that's a bloody great success.
Yeah.
That's probably the big thing.
Yeah.
So guardianship. I mean, they're framed in oak. They're drawn or painted on paper coming from trees. That's cutting down trees, but paper, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I've used, we'll recycle everything that we can. And we're part of this modern world, and clothes that are made in China probably, and all the rest of it. Which is why I love this space, because I think what sort of Mark had the concept of here is this place for regenerative thinking, which is not so much about sustainability, but more about how can we change things. So I don't want to be a hypocrite. So I'm taking something and creating these works, but I'm hoping that I'm getting more back by inspiring, I guess. Yeah.
What are the things that you've learned as you've gone through? Obviously, I know you're a reader as well, and so obviously when you're in a creative process, you're going out, you're experiencing nature, you're doing that as part of that process, and then I know you're also reading in that space. What have been the big learnings as you've gone through this whole process? What have been the big learnings, either things you've discovered through reading or through being in nature? What do you think do you always learn something from an exhibition? You're kind of helping other people to see, but you're also, I would imagine, getting those learnings yourself. So what are the biggest learnings that you've had through putting this together?
I think the communication of trees, the Richard Powers, the understory, amazing book. It was a little, I had it as an audio book. It's quite thick book, beautiful, really interesting way of seeing nature. And then I started reading, lots of other books all about mycelium and how they're connecting. And that really ties into a lot of the Tibetan Buddhist philosophies about sentient beings and how we're all connected. We just happen to be in human form. This notion that this planet is an organism and that we're just part of that organism, that's pretty amazing. So I think all of those things have really just cemented. I'm hoping that Gary Ovid is going to be here soon. He's had to get over the border, and he'll talk a lot about the ecology of and that whole notion of being connected. So I think that's the strongest thing for me. And everything I'm reading about trees and about nature goes back to that whole Gaia type thinking about everything being connected. So, and this whole idea of trees here are infected by some kind of bug, and then the trees over there get the message and they protect themselves. Oh, that's amazing. We know less about that than we know about under the moon. Let's get rid of people. What could we learn from that? What medicines are available? What could we learn? Can I just say this? The one thing that I think, while we can do all these amazing technological things, nano robots into our bodies to fix things and all sorts of stuff, we haven't evolved our humanity. We haven't evolved our social responsibility. We haven't evolved our way of being able to be a community that works harmoniously together. I mean, look at the state of the world. And so, I think that that's something that we need to put more energy into, is how to be better human beings and evolve beyond. I mean, my kids can't believe what it's like, what it would have been like without the internet. Wasn't that long ago? I remember doing a festival where we had to communicate with faxes. That was the fastest way to communicate. It wasn't that long ago.
It's 10 years in the making. It's really interesting, the mycelium. Other people might not know what that's about. So could you just explain that just briefly?
Yes, so mycelium, does anybody not know what mycelium is? Okay, so mycelium is the fungi under the soils, and so they, let's say a rotting tree, they take root, or they spread little tentacles basically. So what you see, the mushroom is just the top part of it, and then underground there'll be all these tentacles, and they send messages across to other mice. They form like networks underground and communicate, and through those networks they send messages that that tree over there, 50 metres away or 2 kilometres away, is under attack, and so the tree starts to build immune systems to protect itself from whatever's happening over here, or the wind. And I think that's it's just extraordinary.
Yeah, it teaches us how to communicate. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's
absolutely.
like advanced communication.
Yeah. So mycelium, look it up. That's very good.
Yeah. There's a documentary somewhere on Netflix or something. What's it called?
Fantastic.
Fantastic fun. Get into it. Do yourselves a favour. That's my Molly Baldwin moment. It's a good place for us to wrap up, because I think Bronwyn Davies has been a pretty potent mycelium herself. The funky fungus. The fungal. Not a fungus, but a fungal. And I say that really because she brings one of her absolute talents as a person. Obviously, she's a hugely talented artist. She's also a hugely talented community member. She builds community. She's brought us together for this weekend. I know it's going to be a great weekend. It was a great night last night. It's going to be a great day today. And as Bronwyn said, just before, a major focus always is in building those connections and building those communities of people to do good. And so it's a great match-up here with the Centre for Regenerative Arts. It's been a great event so far. I know it's going to get better throughout the weekend. Thank you so much for all being here for the chat this morning. I just wanted to also remind you that if you are buying pieces of work throughout the weekend, there's a percentage of sales going to land care, which again, get behind that, because that's such a massive thing. And I suppose it goes to that thing that Ron just shared with you about not wanting to be in a space of hypocrisy, but really wanting to make sure that she's she's living that change that I suppose she'd like to see everyone else kind of embracing. Thank you so much for allowing me to kind of have a chat with you today. I know